Hey everyone, and welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We're always keeping an eye out, for stocks that are making moves. And today, we're going to focus on Moderna, ticker symbol mRNA. And it's been a pretty wild ride for Moderna lately, hitting those 52-week lows and then suddenly bouncing back. What's the story there?
Well, what's interesting is that Moderna's stock seems to dance to like a different tune than the rest of the market. Like when you think about it, they hit that 52-week low, which usually that means that investors are, getting a little spooked. But then bam, news of a new coronavirus strain pops up over in China, and their stock goes up over 5% in a single day.
So while the rest of the market kind of takes a dip, Moderna's like, hold my vaccine, I'm going up. It's crazy how just news about infectious diseases can have such an impact right away.
It really shows you how Moderna and a lot of biotech companies kind of operate in their own little world, especially for a company like Moderna, who, their fortunes have been so closely tied to the COVID-19 vaccine.
Okay, so let's talk about Moderna's performance recently. Their Q4 2024 earnings report, it was a little bit of a disappointment. They reported $966 million in sales, which again was mostly from their COVID-19 vaccine. But that's a pretty steep drop from the $2.8 billion that they brought in during the same period last year.
Yeah, that drop in revenue is really a consequence of, less demand for the COVID-19 vaccine as the pandemic, fades from view. It's to be expected, but it definitely creates a challenge for Moderna, going forward as they try to figure out, what their next steps are. And then just to make things a little bit more interesting, they posted a larger loss than expected, partly because they had to pay out $238 million to end a manufacturing contract.
Okay, so not exactly a great time in the earnings department, but they have mentioned some pretty aggressive cost-cutting measures, right? They've managed to slash operating expenses by 27% compared to 2023. Does that give you any hope that they're adapting to this new reality?
Yeah, they're definitely trying to adjust, that's for sure. But there is another kind of wrinkle that we need to talk about. The FDA decided to pause Moderna's late-stage trial for their norovirus vaccine. It happened on February 14th, and it seems like one of the people in the trial developed Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a rare neurological disorder, and that's what made them decide to pause it.
Now, for those of us who aren't, medical experts, why is this pause such a big deal for Moderna? I mean, they've got other things in the pipeline, right?
Well, this pause is, it's significant because Moderna is really banking on, these new mRNA vaccines being successful to, fill the gap that's been left by the dwindling COVID-19 vaccine sales. This norovirus trial was a key piece of their strategy to kind of broaden their product lineup and move beyond, just being the COVID-19 company. So this pause kind of throws a bit of a, wrench in their plans.
But Moderna isn't just sitting around. In that same quarter, the fourth quarter of 2024, they actually filed for 3 new mRNA products. So we're talking like a next-generation COVID shot, a combination COVID and flu vaccine, and an expansion of their RSV vaccine. That's pretty ambitious, right?
If you kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture, Moderna is making a bold move. They're trying to break free from depending on the COVID-19 vaccine and tap into a massive $30 billion market for new vaccines. Their goal is to launch, as many as 10 new products within the next 3 years. It's a high-stakes gamble, but if they can pull it off, it could pay off big time.
And remember that February 18th stock jump we mentioned earlier, the one where Moderna's stock went up 8.37% to close at $35.75 per share. Could that be a sign that some investors are looking past the short-term setbacks and saying, what we think Moderna's going to do well in the long run? It seems like those new filings might have made people a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Some investors might be willing to, take a chance on Moderna's ability to, change up their products and become a major player in this whole mRNA vaccine space. Of course, there are always risks, but that's part of, what makes investing in a company like Moderna so interesting.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Moderna's stock from a technical point of view.
So as of February 23rd, 2025, Moderna's stock is still on that roller coaster we talked about. It went down to that 52-week low, but it has bounced back a little bit. It closed on Friday, February 21st, at $37.82, up 5.2% for the day. Which is interesting because that happened while the market overall was actually down, but we need to be careful about some of those key resistance levels, like the $48 Fibonacci retracement mark. That one's going to be tough to get through.
Hold on a second. You said Fibonacci retracement. For those of us that don't spend all day, looking at charts, can you break that down for us? What does that mean and why should we care?
Okay, so Fibonacci retracement levels are basically horizontal lines on a chart, and they show potential areas where the stock might run into some support or resistance. Support is where buying pressure is strong. Resistance is where selling pressure kicks in. They're based on a mathematical sequence called the Fibonacci sequence, but you can really just think of them as, potential turning points for the stock. The $48 mark is important because it's a level where the stock might hit some selling pressure. If the stock wants to keep going up, it needs to break through that $48 ceiling convincingly.
So if you're watching Moderna and thinking about buying in, breaking through $48 would be a good thing. It's like a test for the bulls, right?
Exactly. Now, let's look at trading volume.
Trading volume always sounds so technical, but I know it's an important piece of the puzzle. Remind us what it means and why it matters here.
Trading volume is basically how many shares of a stock are being bought and sold over a period of time. Think of it as like, how much interest and activity there is from investors. In Moderna's case, we see some pretty interesting spikes in volume.
Like when? Give us some examples.
Okay, so when the stock hit that low point earlier in February, there was this huge surge in trading volume. This could mean that a lot of investors were like, okay, I'm done, I'm selling because they lost hope. But on the other hand, we also saw a big spike in volume during that news-driven jump when the news about the new coronavirus strain in China came out.
So a surge in volume can mean different things depending on, the price is going up or down. It could mean panic selling or people really wanting to buy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It all depends on what else is happening. But it's not just volume that matters. We also need to look at moving averages. They can help us understand the overall trend of the stock.
Right. Moving averages, they're like a stock's report card, showing us how it's been performing over time. But sometimes they can be a little hard to understand. Can you explain them to us?
Yeah, sure. Moving averages are just the average price of a stock over a certain time period. We use them to smooth out the daily ups and downs so we can get a clearer picture of where the stock is headed. For example, the 50-day simple moving average or the 50-day SMA is calculated by taking the average closing price of the stock over the past 50 days.
So it's like checking the stock's temperature over a longer time. It helps us look past the day-to-day changes, right?
Exactly. And for Moderna, its 50-day SMA is around $43 right now, which is quite a bit higher than its current price.
So that's not a good sign, right? Does that mean the stock has been going down lately?
It does suggest that the stock has been trending downwards over the past 50 days. And if you look at the 200-day SMA, which gives us an even broader view, it's even higher, around $60. This shows just how much Moderna's stock has dropped from where it was before.
Wow, that's a pretty big drop. But you also mentioned shorter-term moving averages, right?
All right, the 20-day SMA, which looks at a shorter time frame, is closer to $36, and the fact that Moderna closed above that on Friday is a small positive sign. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's some
So a little bit of hope with the shorter term.
Maybe. If Moderna can get above that 50-day SMA at $43, it could mean we'll see some more strength over the medium term. But we're not there yet. For now, the price is still below these key moving averages, which suggests that things are still looking a bit down overall.
Got it. So moving averages can be helpful indicators, but we need to think about both the short-term and long-term trends.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about another technical indicator that can give us some insights into the stock's momentum, the Relative Strength Index, or RSI.
RSI always sounds so complicated. Can you explain it to us? What does it tell us and why is it important?
The RSI is a momentum oscillator. It measures how much the price has changed recently to figure out if the stock is overbought or oversold. It's a number between 0 and 100.
Okay, but what does that number actually tell us?
Think of it like this. It tells you how much buying or selling pressure there is on a stock. A high RSI, usually above 70, means the stock might be overbought, meaning it's gone up too fast and could go down soon. On the other hand, a low RSI, usually below 30, means the stock might be oversold, meaning it's gone down too much and could go up soon.
So it's like a thermometer for investor sentiment, helping us see if a stock is getting too hot or too cold.
Exactly. For Moderna, its RSI on the daily chart has gone up to around 45 to 50 after going below 30, which is considered oversold territory earlier in February.
So it seems like the selling pressure might be easing up a bit.
That's one way to look at it. This bounce in the RSI goes along with that price recovery we've been talking about, and it could be a bullish divergence.
Bullish divergence. Now that sounds interesting. What does that mean?
It means we're seeing higher lows in the RSI. While the stock price is still making lower lows, this can be an early sign that the momentum might be changing.
So even though the stock price is still struggling, the RSI is saying the bears might be losing their grip.
Exactly. It's not a sure thing, but it's something to watch for.
Got it. So the RSI can help us see potential turning points even when the stock price isn't showing them yet.
Right. Now, let's not forget about support and resistance levels. Those are the price points where the stock tends to find either buying or selling pressure.
Right. Support and resistance. Those are like the invisible barriers that affect how the stock moves, right?
Exactly. Support levels are like floors, where buying pressure is usually strong enough to stop the price from falling further. Resistance levels are like ceilings, where selling pressure tends to kick in and stop the price from going higher.
So it's like a battle between bulls and bears, and these support and resistance levels are their battlegrounds.
That's a great way to put it. For Moderna, we see support holding around the $31 to $34 range. That's where buyers stepped in earlier this month. But resistance is kicking in at $42, where we've seen the recent highs and a lot of trading volume. And then again at $48, which is that Fibonacci target we talked about.
Okay, so if Moderna wants to really move up, it needs to get past that $42 resistance level with a lot of volume. Otherwise, it might just bounce back and forth between those support and resistance levels.
Exactly. If it breaks above $42 with strong volume, it could mean the momentum is changing and the stock might go up to that $48 target or even higher. But if it can't break through, we might see it go back down to that $34 support level.
Got it. So support and resistance levels give us a map of how the price might move. But we've been talking about the technical side of things. Let's talk about the fundamentals of the company. How does Moderna's financial health and its overall strategy fit into all of this?
That's a great question. Technical analysis can be a powerful tool, but it's important to look at the fundamentals too. We need to look at the company's financials, their management team, their competition, and their overall plan.
For sure. So let's put it all together. We've got these not-so-great earnings reports, trial pauses, but then we also have these stock jumps related to viruses and progress in their pipeline of new products. It's a mixed bag, to say the least. So what does all of this mean for someone who's thinking about investing in Moderna?
It's a complicated situation for sure. Moderna has both big risks and potentially big rewards.
So it's not a simple decision either way. It's more nuanced than that. But can you walk us through it? What are the main risks and potential rewards that investors need to think about?
Well, one of the biggest risks with Moderna is how volatile it is. The stock is super sensitive to news and events, like we've seen with those crazy price swings. It's definitely not a stock you want to just buy and forget about.
Definitely not for the faint of heart. So volatility is one risk. What else should investors be careful about?
Another thing to worry about is that Moderna still depends a lot on its COVID-19 vaccine. Like we talked about, the demand for that vaccine is going down. So their success in the future really depends on their ability to offer different products.
So their pipeline of new mRNA products is really important. But as that norovirus trial pause showed us, there are always going to be problems when it comes to developing new drugs. It's not as easy as just making a vaccine and then watching the money come in.
Exactly. There are so many things that can affect it, like regulations, manufacturing challenges, competition from other companies. It's a tough business.
Okay, so we've talked about the risks. Now let's talk about the potential rewards. What's the good side here? What makes Moderna so attractive to some investors?
The potential rewards are huge if Moderna can successfully switch to these new vaccines. If they can get these products to market quickly and efficiently, they could really take advantage of a multi-billion-dollar market and see a ton of growth. Remember, they're trying to launch up to 10 new products in the next 3 years.
That's a big goal, but timing is everything, right? The market rewards companies that can actually do what they say they're going to do.
Absolutely. Investors are always thinking ahead, trying to guess which companies are going to be successful in the future. And if Moderna can prove that they're more than just a COVID-19 company, their stock could really go up a lot.
So for someone who's thinking about adding Moderna to their portfolio, what are some important things to watch for? What kind of signals should they be looking for?
From a technical analysis standpoint, we've talked about some key levels to keep an eye on. That $42 resistance level is really important. If Moderna can break through that level with strong volume, it could mean the momentum is shifting and the stock might go up even more.
So breaking through $42 is like a green light, a sign that things are looking up.
Exactly. But if it can't break through, we might see it go back down to that $34 support level. It's all about watching those key levels and how the stock reacts to them.
Okay, that's helpful for people who like to look at charts. But let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture. Moderna is operating in an industry that's always changing and can be hard to predict. What are some things outside of their control that could really shake things up for them, either in a good way or a bad way?
That's where things get really interesting. We've talked about Moderna's challenges and opportunities, but what about things they can't control? Like, imagine there's a sudden outbreak of bird flu. Not just rumors, but a real widespread outbreak. That could cause the demand for a new vaccine to skyrocket. And guess who's been working on a bird flu vaccine?
Moderna. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. Their stock could go way up if that happened right.
It could definitely happen, but on the other side, think about what could happen if regulations change. What if the FDA becomes even more careful about approving new mRNA vaccines? Or what if people start to feel a negative about these kinds of vaccines? Those things could really hurt Moderna's chances of growing.
It's a high-stakes game, for sure. So much depends on things they can't fully predict or control.
Exactly, and that's why investing in biotech, especially in a company like Moderna, means you need to be okay with taking some risks, and you really need to understand both the science and how the market works.
It's not just about picking stocks. It's about understanding the whole environment that these companies are in.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here on Investing Talk podcast. We want to give you, our listeners, the information and insights you need to make smart investment decisions.
So to wrap it all up, Moderna is at a crossroads. They're dealing with declining COVID-19 vaccine sales. They're dealing with pauses in their trials. And they're trying to convince the market that they have a good future ahead even after the pandemic. They're making big bets on new mRNA products, but there's no guarantee that they'll be successful.
Like we've been talking about things outside of their control, like new outbreaks or changes in regulations could have a huge impact on what happens to them. It's a company with high risk but also high potential rewards, which makes it a really interesting case study for anyone who's interested in the biotech world.
For sure, it's a story that's still unfolding, and we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on it here on Investing Talk podcast. But now we want to hear from you. What do you think about Moderna? Do you think they can succeed in this new environment?
Yeah, it's a really, that's a tough situation to be in. But, to answer your question, one of the big things that makes Moderna risky is how much its stock price can change quickly. It reacts really strongly to any news or events that happen, like we saw with those big price swings earlier. It's not the kind of stock you want to buy and then just forget about.
Yeah, it's definitely not for people who get nervous easily. So volatility, that's one risk. What else should investors watch out for?
Another thing is that Moderna still depends a lot on its COVID-19 vaccine for its sales. Like we talked about, the demand for that vaccine is going down. So if they want to be successful in the future, they really need to offer other products besides just that one.
So their pipeline of new mRNA products is really important. But like we saw with the norovirus trial pause, there are always going to be setbacks when you're trying to develop new drugs. It's not easy to just create a vaccine and then sit back and watch the money roll in.
Right, exactly. There are so many things that can go wrong, like dealing with regulations, manufacturing problems, and competition from other companies. It's a tough industry to be in.
Okay, so we've talked about the risks. Now let's flip it around and talk about the potential rewards. What's the upside here? What makes Moderna so appealing to some investors?
The payoff could be huge if Moderna can successfully shift to these new vaccines. If they can get these products out there quickly and efficiently, they could tap into this huge market that's worth billions of dollars. And that could lead to a ton of growth for them. Remember, they're aiming to launch like 10 new products in the next 3 years.
Yeah, that's ambitious. But timing is everything right. The market rewards the companies that can actually deliver on their promises.
Oh, for sure. Investors are always looking ahead, trying to figure out which companies are going to be the big winners in the future. And if Moderna can show everyone that they're more than just a COVID-19 company, their stock price could really take off.
So for someone who's thinking about buying Moderna stock, what are some key things they should be watching for? What kind of signals should they be looking for?
From a technical analysis perspective, like we've been talking about, there are some important levels to keep in mind. That $42 resistance level is really important. If Moderna can break above that price with a lot of trading volume, it could be a sign that the stock is gaining momentum and might go up even higher.
But breaking above $42 is like a green light saying, yeah, things are looking good.
Exactly. But if it can't break above that price, it might drop back down to that $34 support level. It's all about watching those levels and seeing how the stock reacts.
Okay, that's helpful for people who like to analyze charts. But let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Moderna is operating in a really dynamic and unpredictable industry. What are some things outside of their control that could have a big impact on them, either positively or negatively?
That's what makes this so interesting. We've talked about the challenges and opportunities for Moderna, but what about the things they can't control? Like, imagine what would happen if there's a sudden outbreak of bird flu. And I don't mean just rumors. I mean a real serious outbreak that spreads widely that could make the demand for a new vaccine go through the roof. And guess who's been developing a bird flu vaccine?
Moderna. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. Their stock could really soar if that happened, right?
Yeah, it could definitely happen. But then on the other hand, think about what would happen if regulations change. What if the FDA starts being even more careful about approving new mRNA vaccines? Or what if public opinion starts to turn against these types of vaccines? Those things could really hurt Moderna's ability to grow.
It's a high-risk, high-reward situation for sure. A lot depends on things they can't fully predict or control.
That's right. And that's why investing in biotech, especially in a company like Moderna, requires a certain amount of, being comfortable with risk. And you really need to understand both the science and how the market works.
It's not just about picking stocks, it's about understanding the whole system these companies operate in.
Precisely. And that's what we're trying to do here on Investing Talk podcast. We want to give you, our listeners, the information and knowledge you need to make informed decisions about investing.
So to sum it all up, Moderna is at a crossroads right now. They're dealing with fewer sales of their COVID-19 vaccine pauses in their clinical trials and trying to prove to the market that they have a strong future even as the pandemic fades away. They're putting a lot of faith in new mRNA products, but there's no guarantee that they'll be successful.
Like we've been discussing things outside of their control, like outbreaks of diseases or changes in regulations could really change their course. It's a company with high risk, but also high potential reward, which makes it a really interesting case for anyone who's interested in the biotech field.
Absolutely. It's a story that's still unfolding, and we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on it here on Investing Talk podcast. But now we want to hear from you. What do you think about Moderna? Do you think they have what it takes to make it in this new environment?